Hello everyone, welcome to Reddit News Daily. Today we'll be talking about prorevenge, in which people get what they deserve. Our first post is by Lime Cherry. Manipulative, power-hungry aunt torments my family for years. Cost her $300,000. Dealt with my crappy, manipulative, abusive aunt all my life, finally got revenge. The players, myself, male, late 30s, sister, 3 years younger, aunt, older sister to my mother, single mom, adopted, no blood relation to my aunt, cousins, 3 total, 1 male, 2 female, have good relationships with them now, mostly. From my estranged father, who had been living several counties over, is pretty much out of the picture by the time my parents got their divorce when I was 9. Due to financial hardship, we were forced to live with my aunt and the nightmare of a household we would soon find ourselves in. My aunt married into Georgia wealth, and you can figure out what that means on your own. She has 3 kids and eventually caught her husband having an affair. It's a huge scandal. She gets the house, the kids, a fat payout from the family attorney. This is important because my aunt didn't do a dang thing in her life to earn her money, her house, her lifestyle, or basically anything. She was born poor along with my mom. Under her household, she was drunk with power. Years of therapy have allowed me to recognize that certain people, when in a situation of power, get a perverse pleasure in ordering others to do their bidding. She was the strictest of authoritarians in every way possible way you can imagine. Chores had to be completed by exact specific time, vacuuming by 3:40 p.m., dishes by 3:55 p.m. Laundry days for my mother, us kids, were Tuesday, Thursdays, 5:35 p.m. to 7:55 p.m. If it was still running, she would shut the power off for the 2 units. As we grew older, her own kids opted to stay with her father for full-time custody, and she had them on weekends. Even they couldn't stand her when she was in charge and in the house. As time passed, she got them less and less, opting for alternating weekends as high school activities took precedence over time with mother. For my sister and I, the large 6-bedroom house was not ours for the taking. My mom had to pay rent as well as rent for 1 bedroom, as that was all she could afford on her salary. We had to share a bedroom until my 2nd year of high school. All the while, there was 1 spare unused bedroom available to all at all times. My aunt needed this for guests when they stayed over. Not 1 guest stayed there in the 10 years I was under that roof. Finally, the church we attended told my aunt to give up the spare bedroom so my sister can have her own room, as it was unhealthy for 2 teenagers sharing a room together like that. That infuriated my aunt because someone told her what to do in her own household. My sister and I got the brunt of her wrath as my mom's salary was tapped out. My sister and I had to do extra chores like mowing the lawn, trimming the shrubs, cleaning the pool, which we could no longer use without her being outside watching us. My aunt's behavior was becoming more and more outrageous and disconnected from society. For example, she had always snapped her fingers when she wanted to get someone's attention, but it was getting far more frequent, and she would blow up into a tirade if either my sister and I didn't obey. Her own kids tried repeatedly to tell her that the crap she was doing was wrong, but she wouldn't listen. Eventually, they wanted nothing to do with her outside of the home. She was a tyrant there, and repeated intervention to get her to see the folly of her ways would fall on deaf ears. I snapped. All through high school, I had no confidence as a person. I was weak-willed and growing ever distant from friends and society. I say all this in truthfulness and fear that had circumstances continued the way they had been going, I could very well have taken a gun to myself or worse, the others around me. I was that bad off. I had just graduated high school and started my first semester of community college. I'm 2 weeks into classes attending from home when my aunt drops a bomb on me. You owe me money for this month's rent. The same amount next month's rent as well. It is the 27th after all. You're an adult now. You're out of high school and working now, so you need to pay rent. The hell? I blew a freaking gasket as I yelled back. You can't just suddenly decide to charge me rent because you feel like it. I need 30 days notice. I have rights. My aunt decided to yell at me some BS excuse that she had discussed this with my mother, and it was still decided that I need to pay my own rent now. In some miraculous backman move, of which I still had no idea how I stood up to her, I yelled right back at her. If I'm an adult, then treat me like and talk to me about rental agreements. I started paying you rent in 30 days, starting after the first. I turned my back to her and walked away with my fists balled tight. I was furious with anger, but I walked away. My aunt saw my fist from behind and screamed bloody murder that I was going to attack her. No, I wasn't. She snapped her fingers at me repeatedly on my tail to get my attention, but I didn't turn around. I needed to cool off and clear my head. As I turned the corner, she grabbed my wrist hard, yelling, "I'm not finished talking with you." I threw my still balled fist up forward, keeping with my stride to break her grip as I hadn't stopped my momentum. This caused her grabbing my arm to slam hard into the corner of the wall that I had just turned into. She screamed in pain, but I left the house and took off. The aftermath of that incident was that my aunt called the cops on me in an attempt to press charges. She was taken to the hospital and suffered a fractured wrist, and she was put in a cast sling. Don't know, as I never saw it and never inquired further. Her story changed every time she told the cops what happened, while my story was spot on every time. I can still recall that moment down to the smell in the house, where I was facing, the working and non-working light bulbs, etc. Forgive ingrained in me. I was kicked out of the house, and I couldn't visit my sister or my mom there at the house again. Fine by me, as I didn't want to see my poor aunt ever again. I was happy to meet my mother and sister at the local diner outlet, where we could be ourselves there and not hostages in our own home. Years later, my mom wised up and got out of that abusive relationship with her sister and moved out on her own. She got a temporary nice place, invested wisely, and with help from the church, got help getting a place of her own. In 2009, after the housing crisis, she bought her own place that she could never have afforded on her own prior to the market crash. But some good came out of it. She wept knowing my sister and her family and myself can come visit any time and stay. Over the years, I've been able to forgive my aunt, not forget, forgive. I let a lot go of my anger and hatred towards her that she put me through. When she has no leverage or control over us, she's somewhat a decent person. For being a total grunt of a person, my cousins have calmed down, heard my side of what happened those years ago, and know what kind of person I am compared to what kind of person their mother is. They chose to believe me and didn't know I didn't hit her or strike her or beat her across the face like she continues to claim. The revenge. While I have been able to forgive my aunt for what she has done to me, I cannot forgive her for what she has done to my mother, kept her in financial hardship for a decade while she sat on a bank account full of cash and assets. Or what she did to my sister, forced her to pay for damages because the water heater burst while my aunt and mother was away on one weekend, leaving my sister at home. She didn't discover the flooded room for hours. My aunt's reasoning, it was her responsibility to watch the house, not the responsibility of the homeowner to replace the water heater before it goes, let's leave that upfront $5,000 financial burden before the flood insurance kicks in on a 16-year-old girl. I've had little to no contact with my aunt since I was kicked out of the house nearly 2 decades ago, but I do keep in constant contact with my cousins. While I'm not going to divulge what I do for a living, I can say that I work with and for the government. I've worked my ass off getting to where I'm at today. I'm known for being truthful, wise, and giving good advice when asked. Because of this, I often talk financially with my cousins, all of whom are money smart and are doing well for themselves. They often relay this information to their scheming mother, who has no mind for business and investments. All the money she got from her house sale, her divorce settlement, her precious investments is pretty much gone. I spent years planning the perfect trap, and it took a long time to prepare everything to make sure everything appears right. I am not a lawyer, and I don't pretend to know the law, but I do know the regulations and laws pertaining to insider information. This is not that. 100% certain of it, and if I ever go to court, I know my lawyer has a solid case in my defense. But this is a gray area, most definitely. I let slip to my cousins about some future real estate plans near my aunt's new area of living. It may be worth a lot more because of future developing taking place in the area. All of that was true and backed up by what was in the newspaper and new construction signs that newly appeared on Google Maps at the time. The rest was fabricated by myself, backed up by actual information I looked up on real estate websites and on projects I was working on through my work. The telephone game takes place, and a few weeks later, I presume, my aunt starts making phone calls to real estate agents trying to buy up lots of land under development in the underdeveloped, crappy area of her new house. Over the course of a few months to half a year, she spends $300,000 of her last remaining savings on land, hoping it will pay out when the area around it gets developed in the upcoming years. Only HUD, Government City, doesn't have any plans to develop in those immediate areas. In fact, analysis showed that building in those areas was poor planning and would cost the taxpayers twice to 3 times as much, as the land was not environmentally sound. It was best to build 6 miles away. This post was long overdue because it's been over 2 years since my aunt purchased land that is basically worthless. See, she won't sell the land unless she gets at least the same price she paid for it, because she's the owner of that land. She can't tell what to do on her own land. Sweet karma strikes in a way I couldn't possibly have foreseen. My cousin informed me that the value of the land has decreased significantly because it's not environmentally sound to build anything commercial there, but it's zoned for commercial use. Currently, 3 of the 4 blocks of land she purchased are just weed farms next to an eyesore abandoned building or industrial complexes. Nobody can build on it, and nor does anyone want to buy it. Sucks to be her. Best part is, my cousins have absolutely no idea that I set them up for the mother to take the fall. These environmental results are relatively new and the perfect cover to say why the project changed location 6 miles away. The TLDR. Abusive aunts torments my family and myself for a decade and more. Decades later, I am in a position to trick her into buying worthless land. Icing on the cake, that land can't be used for its intended purposes and has devalued significantly. Awesome. OP, you are like a freaking mastermind. This was like long-term revenge with a lot of trickery to get your terrible aunt to take that $300,000 invested into land that is essentially worthless and is devalued to where nothing can be built on it, nothing will. So shilling that broke, probably losing everything, including the house. Great story, OP. Great revenge. Sorry you had to go through all that crap. Your aunt sounds terrible, and she got everything she deserved. Our next post is by Zakana. I got fired. Employees' lawyers should have done their homework. I did. This happened to me about 20 years ago while in college. I am being deliberately vague because of certain reasons. Background information. I got a job basically office sitting on weekends. I showed up at 8 a.m. every hour and I checked over things, handled the occasional phone call, and then left when the 4 p.m. person arrived. Most of the time I read, watched TV, or played games on my laptop. I probably worked no more than 10 minutes of every hour unless something went wrong. It went on like this for years. The pay was decent, holidays were double pay, and I even had opportunities to cover weekend shifts when others were sick. One day while I was covering the midday shift, my boss asked me to come into his office. He told me that evening weekday position was going to become available that night. He offered me the position, which I accepted. I was told to punch out and return at 5 p.m. that night. The reason it went down like this should be obvious. Things went okay for a while. I showed up at 4 p.m., did the normal things, and then left at 12 a.m. when my relief arrived. It was a little more work, more call volumes, etc. Then, after 9 months, things started to go south. The daytime person developed a huge attitude problem and went from nice person to a total Karen. She would complain about everything I did. For example, one time a system jammed up at a remote site and she called them. 5 hours later, I saw the jam was still there, so I called the site again to see if they were still working on it or if something else was wrong, because the woman on our end, who would be the one to help them, was leaving soon. They did have a problem, and so I hooked them up. My reward for making sure the problem got solved and not having to bother an upper level employee at home on a Friday just after having left work, I got yelled at because Karen complained that I had apparently ignored her log entry about the issue. My defense was ignored. The boss had me highlight important things on the log to verify that I had read them. Things plodded on for a while with this new normal. I tiptoed around Karen when needed, thankful for the fact I only had to deal with her for no more than 5 minutes. I did the stupid highlighting thing, and my log entries started getting more and more detailed, even referencing Karen's calls when I had to follow up on an issue that crossed shifts. The firing. The following summer, just after I crossed year mark, I went on vacation to visit some friends out of state. When I got back, after about a week, my boss came down after everyone had left and had me describe how I did a certain task, which involved certain updates. I explained to him how I did it and so forth. He then told me that I had not been doing it at all and that he was firing me. I had transposed the date code of the English file for the French file, which was the previous one. The newest one had already been applied anyway, so nothing was wrong. It was just a reason to get rid of me. So I left the office. My state is an at-will employment state, which means that I can quit at any time for any reason, and my employer can terminate me at any time for any reason. The only exceptions were state and federal laws such as race, religion, etc. I thought I was screwed, so I started applying everywhere I could find. During my job search, I happened to accidentally stumble upon a link about employment law. Out of curiosity, I read it and discovered that my employer had shot themselves in the foot. In the employee handbook, there was a job security clause, which this stated was that they would never lay us off and such if our jobs were eliminated. We would simply be retrained and sent to fill an opening elsewhere in the company. It sounds good, but it resulted in them cooking up reasons to fire people to get around it, but their fancy, high-priced lawyers missed something. In my state's laws, the ones passed by legislation, I was screwed because of the at-will. What they neglected was case law, the ones determined by courts. This site cited a case from a state Supreme Court that had ruled that a job security clause waived at will on the employer's side, turning it into a just cause relationship. This means that they had to have a real reason to fire me. The revenge. With that in hand, I sought out a lawyer. After my consultation with her, I set about collecting my evidence. My former boss did not realize that I knew more about this program than he did, seeing as I ran the same software on my own computer and laptop. I experimented. The date of the file, which they try to use against me, is baked into the version too. I was able to demonstrate to my lawyer that if I applied the same update over and over, which my former employer stated would change the date every day, would in reality display the date of the file. I show this by backdating my own copy by a year using the update archive available from the vendor. Next, I show her how the task used to be automated. A script would snag the file and process it every day on its own. A change on the vendor's site broke the script. It was an easy fix, but no one bothered to do it because the guy who had wrote it retired. The fix involved deleting 3 characters on one line in the script. The task was also marked as only being a weekday task. In my firing, I was told how important this update was and so forth. If it was so important, why was it not done on weekends or holidays? The vendor pushed out the updates on those days too, as I showed my lawyer in one of from the Christmas morning. And why had the automation not been fixed? With all that in hand, she contacted them. After presenting them with the law they broke and all the evidence I had collected, they were forced to settle with me. So, in the end, their fancy high-priced lawyers did not do their homework. I did. Thank you to the wonderful librarians I have known in my life who taught me my information literacy skills. They paid dividends in this case. TLDR. I got fired by a large corporation and I thought I had no recourse. Then I found out their high-priced lawyers missed something in my state's law and forced them to pay me. And after OP just posted an update. Edit 1. Obviously, the terms of the settlement are confidential and, as far as I know, still in effect. It was a good portion of my salary, though. I did also get unemployment during this time as well. I never found out the reaction went down, as the main corporate office that would have dealt with it was in another state, and I never had any contact with those people. I imagine a new handbook was issued before they cut my check, though, so I felt bad for those who remained. Karen's fate was sealed about a year later. I saw a Facebook post by a former coworker mentioning that his job with them had ended, so I asked for details. The company experienced a huge loss in revenue, and as a result, Karen lost her job as the site I had worked wasn't closed. Or about the 50 of us that worked in the office, only 10 or so were moved to another location. Thankfully, most of the ones I liked were old enough to retire. It did not take a genius to realize that my termination was simply a layoff disguised as a firing. And again, everyone, this is Reddit News Daily. Today we talked about prorevenge. I apologize that these two stories were pretty long, but they were good and very juicy, and I could not pass up posting these, as people got some seriously hardcore revenge. Anyways, please hit that subscribe button because I'm posting Reddit videos daily.